My name's Ernest Price and I'm the Education Officer at VATE. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really lucky to have with us two of the judges from the Older Readers category in the CBCA Book Awards. Before I introduce them, I'd like to acknowledge the country on which I'm working today. That's the land of the Boonwurrung and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to extend my gratitude to the elders past and present, as well as to any First Peoples who are with us today, and to the elders of the land on which you're working as well. Today, we're very lucky, as I alluded to have with us two of the judges from the Older Readers category for the CBCA Book Awards. I think in all my time as an English educator, I've really struggled to stay on top of the developments, on top of everything else we do as educators, the developments in what is being written for the young people that we work with. So we're really excited to be extending our partnership with the CBCA Vic branch. The two people that we have with us today, firstly, we have Erin Wamala, who is on the CBCA Vic branch committee and is also a teacher librarian at Trinity. Erin's had a range of different roles in the education sector, including working as the education marketing manager at Penguin Books and the manager of the Kids Bookshop. So welcome, Erin. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And we also have Caris McEwen, who I worked with at Richmond High School, where she is the library manager. She's also the library manager at Paran High School, because apparently one school is not enough for her. She's also the president of the CBCA Vic branch. And she also is an author, and her first novel for younger readers, middle readers, will be coming out in 2022. So welcome, Caris.
Thanks so much, Ernest. Thanks for having us.
Now, before I get off the screen and hand over to Caris and Erin, I will certainly encourage you to contribute today to this discussion. We should have plenty of time for questions. If you have any questions that come up, please use the chat function and we can put those questions to Caris and Erin. And we also may have a chance to have some dialogue as well as we go throughout the session. So I'll hand over to Caris and Erin. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much again, Ernest. And yeah, as Ernest said, please put any questions that you have as we go along in the chat. We can try and answer them as we go, or if not, at the end, we can check back and answer them. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. I really appreciate it, especially at the hairy end of term 3. So Erin and I are going to talk through the 6 books that were shortlisted for the Older Readers category this year. But before we do that, I just sort of wanted to talk a little bit about the judging process. So Erin and I read, I think it was about 65 books.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, so quite a lot of young adult novels that we read between sort of April and November last year. And from that, we came up with the long list of 20 books and then the short list of 6 books. And for me personally, it was probably one of the best professional development exercises that I've ever done, because I read pretty much every book published for the age group in that year in Australia. And from that, you can really get a broad overview of publishing in Australia for young people. You can start to pick out some of the trends in literature and see what is being written for the age group. And Erin and I definitely spotted quite a few trends. One of them last year was, and we talk about this a lot, there were a lot of angry young men in young adult fiction last year. A lot of teenage boys that were disenfranchised and were angry for good reason. They were
lots of abusive fathers.
Yes, difficult home life. Bullying, poverty, some really big issues facing our young men in literature. Erin,
and lots of young men sorry, Caris, I was just going to say, but all the thing that most of these young men had in common was they're kind of bucking up against the trends of toxic masculinity, I think, which was really good, to kind of seeing them challenge those notions of what it means to be a man and what it means to be a young man as well, which I thought was really good.
She said, yeah, the young... All good. Some of the other trends that we spotted were there was a lot of own voices fiction last year, and actually we started judging for this year, and it's really continued this year. Seems to be more and more books written by own voices authors, which is fantastic. I think we always need more of that.
Absolutely.
And also one other thing that we really noticed and are really happy about was that genre fiction was really, really strong last year. So you'll notice in our notables list of 20 books, there are quite a few sci-fi, fantasy, historical fiction, some romance, which is great because I think sometimes these literary awards do tend to highlight the more contemporary, realistic books available for young people, but there's no reason why genre fiction can't be seen to have literary merit or have literary merit. And we certainly found that this year.
Absolutely. And I think what we came away from was that we're really proud of our notables list because it's so diverse. And, you know, a few times people have asked me for suggestions for, you know, kind of older readers, you know, kind of teenage readers. And I've pointed them to the notables list and said, really, you could pick just about anything off that list and be really happy with it, I think. It's a really fantastic group of books.
Exactly. So yeah, we're going to talk about the 6 shortlisted books now. But yeah, as we keep saying, we also love the 20 books on the long list. So I implore you to make sure they're in your school libraries, make sure that the young people that you work with are reading them. There's lots to choose from and lots to enjoy yourselves as well as English educators.
And some of them came very close to being on the shortlist, but
yeah,
we didn't quite get them on. We didn't have enough room for all of them.
There are a couple that, I think, it's an interesting process because the CBCA Awards, we judge according to quite a strict criteria. So you do obviously have to take your own personal opinions out of it. And I think, you know, there might have been some books that if it was Karis's favourite books would have been there, or if it was Erin's favourite books would have been there. But it is a really interesting thing to consider literature from a specific set of criteria and work out what meets it and maybe what doesn't quite. That's been good professional development for me as well. All right, so we're going to talk about the 6 books. We'll do 3 each. I'll kick things off with a fantastic, really special book called Ghost Bird by Lisa Fuller. This was, I think, Erin and I, it was one of the last books, if not the last book that we read. And we were both just blown away by this book. Knew immediately that it had to be shortlisted. It sort of came into the world quite quietly last year. It didn't make a huge splash, but I think since then it's been picked up a lot. It's just won the Readings YA prize recently. It's been doing really well. The story is a mystery thriller sort of suspense narrative about a young Aboriginal girl in far north Queensland whose twin sister has gone missing under quite mysterious circumstances. It's genuinely quite creepy at times. I think Erin and I talked about not reading it when you're at home alone at night, but kids are really into that kind of horror stuff at the moment, so it's perfect for them. What it also does is weave some really interesting information about Indigenous history and culture and customs through the narrative to really give insight into that in a brilliant way. This is a book that could work really well as a cross-curriculum text study, because you could certainly use some of this book in a humanities unit as well. So lots to unpack in that. I think this would be an absolutely perfect text study at year 9 or 10. I've just put it on the book list at Paran High School for year 9 in an elective unit on own voices storytelling, actually. So I'm really excited to teach this book or help teach this book next year at Paran. The writing is very authentic, the voice in it is very genuine, and it fills a fantastic gap in First Nations narratives, I think, in Australia. We always want more of those stories, and this one is certainly absolutely excellent. It's been very popular among my book club students. I run a book club at both schools, and it's been quite a good one that I've found adults have enjoyed as well. So I've had a few parents read it at my schools and use that as a way to bond or engage with their children as well. So quite a good one if you have a parent-student book club or something like that. So yeah, I highly recommend Ghostbird. Teaching notes are available for this book and all the books on the shortlist actually through the publisher's website. Some of them are extensive if you're interested in book listing it for future years. The CBCA also on the national website, if you go to the shortlisted section, they have a number of videos with the authors and other resources that you can use if you're thinking about book listing any of the shortlisted books or using them in a more informal kind of book club setting. Great. All right. I'll pass on to Erin for the next book.
Okay. The first one I'm going to talk about is The Boy Who Steals Houses. I'm sorry I don't have my copies with me. Karis is going to hold it up because I left mine at school and I haven't been back since last term, like many of you, I'm sure. This one was an absolute standout for me. I have to admit that I'd seen it kind of floating around in the library at school, and I'd been a little bit turned off by the cover. Like it didn't really grab me, and I hadn't picked it up as a result, and I didn't kind of know much about it. But the nature of doing this judging is that you get to read stuff that perhaps you wouldn't normally read, and you discover some real gems in there. And Ghostbird was probably another one for me, but this one really stood out. So The Boy Who Steals Houses follows Sam and Avery. Sam is about 16, Avery's a little bit older. Avery is autistic, quite high functioning autistic, but Sam still feels the need to sort of protect him quite a bit. The boys have been shunted around a lot since their mother left when they were little. Their father didn't want them because he couldn't handle Avery, and he dumped them basically with an aunt who said right from the beginning she didn't really want them either, but she kind of took them on. When Sam gets into a fight at school, she throws the boys out on the street, and they have been homeless ever since. And in order to survive, they break into houses that seem to be abandoned, and they might stay there for a few days and then move on. So at the beginning of this story, Avery has kind of acquired this group of who he thinks are friends. Sam thinks that maybe they're just guys who are sort of taking advantage of Avery's nature. So the two aren't together at the moment. So Sam breaks into a house thinking that it's abandoned, but while he's asleep upstairs, the family come home. And the family are this great big kind of raucous family with 7 kids ranging from a baby through to kind of older teens. And every Sunday they have this kind of big family get together, I suppose, where all their friends come over. And so when Sam is woken, the house is full of people. And they're all sitting down to dinner. It's kind of loud. And he thinks maybe he can just sneak out the door and no one will notice he's there. But as he kind of makes himself, goes downstairs, he's spotted by someone, and they just assume that he belongs there, that he's someone's friend, friends with one of the boys or something. So they just invite him along, sit down at the table. And he's suddenly surrounded by this atmosphere and this family that he's never had before but always longed for. And even though this voice in his head keeps saying to him, I really need to leave, I don't belong here, he finds himself unable to, and he just kind of keeps hanging around, and he kind of becomes part of the family. But it's of course only a matter of time before someone realizes that he doesn't know anyone, that he shouldn't be there. And so look, I just adored this one. I think it broke my heart 1,000 times. It's so beautifully written, and you just want the best for Sam and his brother, and this big beautiful family who are full of laughter but also kind of dealing with grief because they've lost their mother as well. So it would make an excellent class study, I think, for maybe 8 or 9 perhaps. Would you agree with that, Karis?
Yeah, definitely.
I've had lots of year 8s who have loved it. Yeah. And it really seems to have grabbed all kinds of readers, actually. So some of my big readers have really enjoyed it, and some of my readers who are not big readers have been quite intrigued by it as well, and have taken on and really, really enjoyed it. So yeah, a really beautiful novel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was just going to add to that this is probably the one on the short list that is suitable for the whole kind of age range from, from year 7 till 12. I found it really great for some reluctant, especially, I don't like to stereotype, but I've had some reluctant boy readers really engage with this one in particular last year and this year. So the next book on the list is How It Feels to Float by Helena Fox. This is a very visceral, very intense exploration of mental illness. So it is one that I would say I would encourage you to give trigger warnings before you gave it to any young people. However, obviously mental illness is an increasingly important issue for young people to better understand and engage with, and I think this book is a fantastic way for young people to develop empathy and understanding of some of those issues. There are a lot of books at the moment out there about mental illness for young people, but some of them don't do it that well. I think this one does. It is intense, but it's not gratuitous. It's realistic and it's troubling, but it's also sensitive and authentic, and it's absolutely not didactic either. The young girl Biz, she's obviously a very flawed character, not that likable at times, but you're there with her the whole way, and there's an intergenerational friendship in it as well that Biz has with an older woman. That's really fantastic, and I don't think we see enough of that in young adult literature. I really appreciated that. I know Erin felt the same way. That brought a lot of hope and a bit of lightness to the narrative as well.
Yeah, it really stood out for me, that part, that relationship with the older woman, and that idea that, of thinking about this woman in her, I think she's in her 70s or something, acknowledging the fact that, she had a life. Like, she's not just some old lady, some boring old lady, she had a life, and they actually have a lot in common, and she almost saves Biz in a way, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think in young adult literature, the adults can often be really crap. They can either be absent or dead or really unsupportive. Adults get a pretty bad rap in young adult literature. But the older woman in this book is as I say, brings a lot of hope and lightness to the story. This would be an excellent way to talk about unreliable narrators with young people. There are a number of literary techniques and the way that the structure and the writing is constructed that illustrate the main character's anguish. They illustrate her diagnosis or lack thereof through writing that can be quite confusing, quite foggy, jumps all over the place at times, and it's very, very clever the way that it illustrates her inner turmoil on the page through the writing. Brilliant. I've sort of not read anything that does that so well for the age group. As I said, certainly for older readers, or not necessarily older, but probably more advanced readers. But I could definitely see it on book lists at a year 10 or year 11 level. Failing that, I would just recommend it for reading for pleasure, for young people that can handle these kinds of themes. Somebody said in the chat that Helena Fox had a session at MWF, which was absolutely fantastic. Sadly, it's no longer available, but again, you can find teachers' resources and a number of videos of the author as well on the CBCA website for this one.
Next on my list is Four Dead Queens by Astrid Schultz. And this one, I have to say, when we've been talking about it, it's been a little controversial. It has. It's kind of divided people a little bit. But we were really, really happy to be able to put some genre fiction on the list. And this one fits in, I guess, into the fantasy genre, but also mystery as well. It's essentially a murder mystery. So it's set in a world where we have four kingdoms, kind of side by side, that are ruled by four queens. And it is a true matriarchal society. So these four women who are ruling together in a castle sort of in the middle of these kingdoms, and they are all ruling they're side by side, but in the interests of their own kingdoms. They're not allowed to leave this castle, they're not, or the grounds, they're not allowed to fall in love or get married, though they must provide an heir. And all of this is in aid of them not having any distractions from actually doing their job of being queens. We follow Carolee, who is a young girl who is a thief, a pickpocket in one of the kingdoms, when she steals from a messenger. And she steals what turns out to be the memories of someone murdering these 4 queens. And she believes she has the key to who might be responsible for these murders. And so she tries to make her way to the castle to try and let the authorities know that she has this information. But the really interesting part about this book is that it's not told in a linear narrative. So you actually watch the murders as they happen, and then you're also watching Carolee as she is supposedly looking back on these murders. And what really struck me about this is that I read a lot of books, and you get to know familiar tropes, I suppose, that come about in these kinds of stories. But I was, still 3/4 of the way through, and I had no idea where it was going. Like I could not pick it. I couldn't figure out how the author was going to tie it all together, and she did it brilliantly, I thought. Probably the real standard of this book, I think, and should be of any genre book, is the world building. Her world building is excellent. I believed everything about it. So all 4 kingdoms are quite different. She includes technology and kind of a historical aspect at the same time. Astrid Scholt worked for DreamWorks, and I think she's got that very filmic feel about it. I guess I think that really, it really works for her world building, and she just did a fantastic job. So this one has been, again, whenever I talk about it, it just flies off the shelf. It's never on our shelves at the moment, from year 7 to older kids as well. So another one that really goes across the genres, and also it works for the fantasy fans, but also the murder mystery fans. So, I've recommended it, to kids who are not necessarily big fantasy readers. It's still very accessible for them, but who enjoy the mystery aspect as well. So this would make a great addition if you're doing, a unit on genre fiction or something like that. I think this would be a really worthy addition.
Yes, and I also had Astrid visit my 2 book clubs virtually last week, and I'd highly recommend her as a visiting author. She was incredibly engaging. The kids were raving about it afterwards. As Erin said, she's had a really interesting career. She worked on Avatar and other huge movies in animation and CGI, and the kids were just wrapped. So I highly encourage you, if you're looking for a visiting author for book week or any other occasion, she's great. I just contacted her on Twitter, and we spoke on there and booked it in, so it was really great and easy. So the next book on the list is This Is How We Changed the Ending by Vicky Wakefield. For those of you that know Vicky Wakefield, you'll know that she's an absolute genius in the field. Her insight into the teenage mind is unparalleled. She's never condescending. The writing is just so authentic and so in touch, I think, with teenagers. This one does also have some really heavy themes in it. There's some explorations of abuse and poverty, big on toxic masculinity in this book, and it's quite confronting from the first chapter. I had a student earlier this year when we were still at school pick it up during a wider reading lesson and read the first chapter, and I noticed at the end of the lesson that he was in the library silently weeping in the corner. So I felt quite guilty about that. It is quite harrowing, but he kept reading it and he absolutely raved about it. I think it just elicited quite an emotional response from the get-go. So This Is How the Ending tells the story of a young boy called Nate who struggles. He's one of the angry boys that we were talking about. He struggles against toxic masculinity. He's struggling against a lack of support from the adults around him and from his peers. And he's very disenfranchised. He's a creative kid, but even though he loves poetry and writes poetry, all he wants is to be invisible, and he keeps that side of him quite hidden throughout the book. Again, he's certainly a flawed character in lots of ways, but this book is very much a journey in empathy development, in putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, and it offers some really thought-provoking themes, and ultimately just a very realistic novel that young people, I think, would really enjoy and engage with. A really good book club book, a fantastic text study for year 10 or 11. I would definitely recommend putting this book on a book list. And actually, before we did this, I was just flicking through and I found this little section that I'll just read to you really quickly because it gives you such a sense of what this book is. So in the second chapter, the year 10 English teacher is talking to the boys in his class about how angry they are, again on theme with what we were talking about before, and how they should be angry because they are victims in lots of ways of their society and of multiple things. So this little section says, Kobe Slater laughed first. Everyone else followed. 1 minute, Mr. Reed was upright, yelling at Slater to shut up, telling me to sit down. The next, he collapsed like a sandcastle when the tide comes in. Only the tide was us and our perfect disdain for anyone who drives an Audi but thinks he has the right to tell us our lives are shit. Mr. Reed never fully recovered. Angry about what? I asked him when the class was empty. School's over, McKee, he said. Go home. I want to know, what was stolen? His eyes were dry and sore, like he'd forgotten to blink. Your future, Nate. So that's just a little bit of the writing that I really liked and I thought gave a good sense of the book. This is one that I think you should all read as well. I found a lot of, I don't know if pleasure is the right word, but I got a lot out of it as an educator, as somebody who works with young people, and I highly encourage you to pick it up as well as the young people that you work with.
And the final one is When the Ground is Hard from Nunn, which is just a really, really lovely book set in Swaziland, so near South Africa, and a book that looks at notions of race and racism and poverty and gender. So it follows Adele, who is a coloured girl, so a mixed race girl. She has a black mother and a white father from South Africa. So he has his white family in South Africa. He occasionally comes across to Swaziland to visit Adele and her mother. And they, Adele's family are quite proud of the fact that she has a white father because he is rich. He gives them money, buys them gifts, and he also sends Adele to a boarding school for other mixed race kids like her. So she goes to this boarding school. She's a real snob. She's actually quite unlikable at the beginning, and she goes to the school where she's, kind of one of the top girls, I guess. She's quite popular. She's quite wealthy. She's got this white father, and she has a best friend. But when she turns up on the first day, she finds that another girl has arrived who has a lot more social capital than she does, and her best friend has abandoned her. And so all of a sudden, Adele has fallen down the ladder, I guess, in the social stakes, I suppose. And then to make matters worse, she's forced to share a room with Lottie, and Lottie is poor. She's darker than Adele, so therefore she's lower again on, kind of the social ranks than Adele. And, Adele thinks there's no recovering from this. There's no way she's going to get back to where she used to be if she has to share this room with Lottie. But then the girls start to get to know each other, I guess, somewhat tenuously at the beginning, and they start to bond over a copy of Jane Eyre that Lottie is reading. And so they start reading it together. And they kind of form this friendship that that Adele was not expecting and probably never has experienced before, because she realises that her other friendships are really quite shallow. It also becomes a bit of a mystery story when a boy from the school goes missing, and in very mysterious circumstances, and it's possible that he may have met with trouble with a group of white farmers who own property near the school. And Adele and Lottie kind of become involved in the search for him and trying to figure out what has happened to him. So it's really beautifully written. Again, it's another Own Voices story. What I loved about this is quite often when we are looking for stories to represent, I guess, different cultures and countries, we kind of go back to the same, kind of non-fiction stories. And usually of Africa, we kind of get the same story of, disease or poverty, cruelty, things like that, stories which are important, but it's not often that we just see a story that is so relatable to the kids that we are teaching. And I think a lot of the aspects of what Adele goes through, it's just kids will be able to relate to, the friendship and all those kinds of things. It is set in the 1960s, but it's not necessarily evident. I don't think we realise that until sort of very, very towards the end. I think there's a quick reference to when it's actually set. So it's got a very modern feel to it as well. And I think it raises some interesting questions for readers about, racism within the Black community as well, which is something that they perhaps may not have thought about in a setting of somewhere like, South Africa and Swaziland. As well. So I'm going to admit to you that I teach all boys, and this one has been a bit of a hard sell for me. I've had a couple who have read it, but I do find it a bit of a hard sell, though I keep plugging away. But again, it would be good, year 7 plus. I think if you've got some good year 7 readers, I think they would really enjoy it. And though in our shadow judging that's been going on, the CBC, some readers have really taken to it. I think so. It definitely does appeal to some kids out there.
What I found about this book is it's great for the kids, and I'm sure you all have them who are voracious readers and have read everything and feel like they've read the same stories over and over. Yeah. They've read all the tropes. And this offers just something really unique, a unique setting, a unique time period, the boarding school element. But as Erin said, still all relatable kind of themes and topics. So yeah, I found it really good for those kids. So that is all 6 of the books. The winner and the 2 honour books will be announced on the 16th of October at noon. Sadly, it looks like we'll still be in remote learning for Book Week this year, but there'll be an online announcement for the winner and the honour books. We decided on the winner and the honour books in February, so Erin and I have been busting to get this news out there. We're really excited about that, but as I keep saying, we also love these 6 books, we love the notables, and we highly encourage that you get them into the hands of the young people if you haven't already, or read them yourselves. And also, just quickly, Erin and I, the judging tenure is 2 years, so we're currently reading the next lot of books, the books that are published this year for the awards next year. But the judging applications are now open for next year. So if you're interested in applying to become a judge, I highly encourage it. As I said at the start, it's been probably the best professional development that I've ever done. It's a lot of work, a lot of reading, but a really enjoyable experience. I don't know, Erin, if you had anything to add there.
No, I agree. It's really been a fantastic experience, and to be able to read things that I wouldn't perhaps have gotten around to or picked up and get that really broad overview of the landscape of Australian publishing, I think has been absolutely fantastic, and you can only benefit from it. I think, and it's where you need good judges out there, people who love literature and love books and, love reading for their students as well. I think so we really do encourage you to apply and give it a go.
Yeah, so all the information is available on the website. It's open until, I believe, the end of October, so you've got a little time to think about it. Somebody said, how do we apply? So all the information is on the national website, but they're actually doing it through the branches this year for the first time. So when you apply, it actually comes to our Victorian branch, and then as a committee, we will decide on a short list of judges and present to the national. So all the information is on the website. Check it out. And if you have any questions once you've looked, please feel free to email the Victorian branch office, and we can answer any questions that you have about that.
And this might be a good time to plug. Karis and Erin will be working with us again to put together something for you to use in your schools for Book Week. So we'll be recording in advance, but won't be releasing it until Book Week actually comes, although I'll make sure we send out information just because it's going to contain some sensitive information about the winners. But what that will be is a short resource for you to use, a video of Erin and Karis talking about the kind of criteria that they use to assess. And then it will have an activity accompanying that for you to use with students in your school, where they're able to assess what they've been reading by that criteria. So again, with that idea of empowering young people to really critically engage with what they're reading, that can either be used in an English classroom or through the library. It'll be a really adaptable resource for you. So again, we won't be able to release it to you until Book Week actually rolls around, but it'll be designed for you to use that week or afterwards as you see fit. The second thing before I'm going to open up again to any other questions people might have for Erin and Karis is just a quick plug for VATE State Conference, which is coming up online on Saturday the 3rd of October and Sunday the 4th. As part of the program on Sunday the 4th, we actually have one of, I think, the authors of one of the best YA books to be released this year, which is Kath Moore, who's the author of the incredible Metalfish Falling Snow, which was released a couple of months ago. We're really excited to have her on board on Sunday. So jump on the VATE website for some details about how to register for that conference. Do we have any other questions for the wonderful Karis and Erin today? Feel free to unmute yourself and just ask away.
Yeah, hi, can I, oh, sorry.
No, please go.
Hi, Julianne Anderson. This is Jackie Corliss. Just seen my friend from my same suburb there. I'm wondering, so at the school, we're teaching sort of, I suppose, lower secondary, so 7, 8, 9s, but just finding it really challenging to source text, it's boys and girls, specifically with an Indigenous theme or focus. We've been reading Crow Country by Kate Constable for the last 4 years, and we're looking for something like that isn't, and we've been able to find lots that are like for 16 and 17-year-olds, lots that are for like grade 3 and 4. Any suggestions on that?
Yeah, great question. If anyone wants to jump in with suggestions,
yes. Anyone has any ideas?
I absolutely go Spurred for the older levels, I would say. What's the other one, Ernest? The name's just fallen out of my head.
Catching Telacrow?
Catching Telacrow.
Catching Telacrow, yeah. And we looked at that. In fact, I read that not long ago, but it was just, there are some themes in that are pretty dark. Thinking specifically of our year 7 cohort.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably more an 8 or 9.
Yeah. And that's what we thought too. We thought 8, fantastic. Probably not 7 though. So, the Binna Man, thank you. Whoever popped that in there, great.
To Nona and me.
Yes, that's a good one.
Oh yeah, that's true, Jill. Yeah.
Gorgeous. But we do it at year 9. I think it's quite thick.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that year 7s would read it as a text. Some readers would happily, but I'm not sure.
Sorry. I was going to suggest Sister Heart. Sally Morgan.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If someone else is in that, that's excellent.
Yeah. My sister's an English teacher in WA, and she's teaching Sister Heart to her year 7s right now, and she said she's never had more success with a text study.
Oh, fantastic. That's great. Thank you.
The verse novel as well, so very accessible.
Yeah, very accessible.
Levels.
Yeah.
We're using it, sorry to butt in, we're using it at year 8 at Loretto in Ballarat as a creative writing prompt. So basically they're adapting and writing back to it, and they found it pretty accessible. So the verse makes the heavy things light, and even our kids who struggle have been able to find a way in. So
fantastic. That's great. Thank you. There's some fantastic suggestions. Great.
I'm not sure whether you're open to graphic novels, but Ubby's Underdogs by Brenton McKenna has been really popular with my boys, the 7 and 8s.
Yeah.
So it's a trilogy of graphic novels. So it's set in the Northern Territory, set during, I think from memory, during the Second World War. sort of Darwin, and it's kind of a bit of a fantasy element to it. Really fun, but kind of based on his grandmother actually. I think so. That's a really fun trilogy. The boys just love it at high school. So
fantastic. That's wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
No worries.
There's also on the Readings Kids page, there's a really fantastic list of First Nations books for teens by First Nations authors. I always head to that when I get that. So they have a section that's picture books and a section that's young adult novels. And there's some really great books on that list.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Any other questions for Karis and Erin before we wrap up for today?
Yeah, I've just got one out of curiosity. Considering you can't reveal who won, is there one of the books that you guys read out of your 65 that you personally wish had made it to the list?
Great question.
It's a good question.
I think for me, there's a book on the notables list that didn't make the short list that I really love. And if as I said before, if it was Karis's favourite books of the year, it might be number one. So It Sounded Better in My Head by Nina Kenwood. I see lots of nodding heads, so obviously lots of fans here. Such a gorgeous book. Yeah, if you haven't read it, I recommend that you do. It sums up those feelings of leaving high school really fantastically. It's a romance, but it's sort of quite not a very traditional romance in lots of ways. The main character has acne, which I don't know, when I was a teenager, I had really bad skin and all I wanted was to not feel alone in that. So I think reading this book as an adult and the descriptions of the way that the young character feels about her appearance were really, really powerful for me, and I can imagine they would be for other young people as well. The voice in it is so strong. So yeah, that's a book that I really loved. I don't know about Erin.
Mine was probably Invisible Boys.
I knew you were going to say that.
I know, because I just thought that was wonderful. It's it's so there's humor, but there's so much heart, and it's sad, and it's just got the full kind of spectrum of feelings, I guess, about three boys who are growing up gay in Geraldton in WA, and it's so heartfelt. It is quite I know some people find it quite confronting because he is very frank in terms of emotion and sex and all that kind of stuff. That would probably have been my one that I wish we had more space. We could have put them out. But it's won so many awards already, I suppose. But still, that was probably my pick. And look, it's actually been one that has been picked up quite a bit in my library, I have to say, just on its own. It's obviously something about it appeals to a lot of different readers. So definitely kind of older. I wouldn't give it to sort of year 7. I've given it to some more mature year 8s who have read it, but it's kind of more year 9, 10. But I just thought that was brilliant.
Thank you. More books to add to my list.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Every time I talk to Karis in particular, I end up with, it's my first time meeting her, but I just end up with 20 more books that I need to buy.
Did anybody read anything from the notables that they felt should have been shortlisted or you were disappointed? I'd be interested to hear from anyone. No answer means we made all the right decisions.
That's right.
I haven't read them yet, so that's really embarrassing.
No, but I just wondered if there are any books that people felt we missed. As we keep saying, it's such a hard decision. So many great books, especially local, own voices stories. To me, it's really exciting about how much is available for our young people at the moment. Certainly when I was growing up, there wasn't this amount of Australian young adult novels available. So I think that's really great.
Can I say also that I did some shadow judging with a group of kids last year, the older readers category, shortlist category. So I had them read all 6 books over a few weeks, and then we got together for a couple of hours one afternoon, and they each had a turn talking about the books and their opinions, and they just loved it. It was a fantastic enrichment activity. So I specifically targeted boys who are in those enrichment classes. I gave them the criteria beforehand, so they had to think about that while they were reading the books, and then they just loved sitting around and talking about them and giving their opinions, and they were quite divided on some of them, and then they chose which one they thought was going to be the winner from last year. So if you're looking for something to do with a group, maybe a book club or an enrichment group or whatever, it's a really fantastic activity to do with them.
And you'll be able to be guided in doing that by Karis and Erin when Book Week comes around.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you so much, Karis and Erin, of course, for that incredibly insightful look at the shortlist. Well, I think we're really keen to hear what's going to take it out this year. We really, really appreciate your time today. So thank you so much. And of course, to everybody who has joined us today, I will cut up the audio of this event and put it out on the podcast stream for VATE as well. So if you've got colleagues who would like to listen to this, it will be available for them there. So thank you again so much to Erin and Karis and to everyone for joining us today.